Welcome to episode 6 of the series Care to Talk. This is a series we developed in NUHS really to have our leadership chat with us really on very important and current topics across the organization, things that affect everybody around here and even you in the public. Today I have a very special guest and really a pleasure to have in the same room with me today, Miss Margaret. And Margaret is a really old friend whom I've known for many years now and really very passionate about the work she does. I'm not going to steal the limelight from her. I'm going to let her share her own introduction.
Thanks, Daniel. I'm glad to be here on the show.
Please tell our audience really a bit more about yourself and your journey in NUHS and through the many years. And how many years has it been now, Margaret?
It'll be 30 years by next year.
Wow,
Yeah,
okay.
so I'm a nurse by training. Currently, I'm taking on a very different role. I would just sum up to say that my journey here has been nothing but a privilege. Really because I've had the chance to witness the organization go through phases.
Wonderful. Thanks, Margaret. You've held so many different roles through your career in NUHS. I think one of the more recent roles you've had was the Chief Culture Officer in Alexandra Hospital. And of course, the impending role you're going to take on, really the most important role in the organization. But I'd like to focus a little bit more on the culture aspect. Because today's episode, we're going to really focus on how does culture drive well-being. In the context of WeCare as one NUHS, tell us a bit more about your experience as a Chief Culture Officer.
Right. I think in order for me to describe a little bit more in detail, it might be helpful for me to define what culture means to me. And if I can put it very plainly, culture is contributed by a group of people. And we can simply say that this is how the way we do things here. But what does it mean when we say this is how we do things here? It has to be anchored on shared values, beliefs, and how it's demonstrated in the decisions that we make, the way we behave, the way we respond to different situations. And organizationally, what it means is we have a large collection of people who ascribe to the same kind of values and belief system. And how we actually espouse this would be through the different roles that we assume, the kind of decisions that we make collectively, as multiple job groups, as well as within a single job unit. So this really is what I see culture to be. And it is really shaped by, first and foremost, every individual who choose to align their personal values together with the organizations. Without that alignment, it is very hard to really live in a very authentic way, to believe in what we try to do here. And sometimes we may even encounter differences where there is healthy tensions. And in those moments, it allows us to examine what this means to me and what it means to the organization, and still find that common point in order to move forward as one team.
Wow, very well put, Margaret. Wonderful. We always talk about culture, as you said, it's like the personality of the organization, the collection of the mindsets and behaviors within the organization. But in your experience as a Chief Culture Officer in Alexandra Hospital, what do you see as some of the challenges in cultivating a culture? What have you encountered in the past couple of years?
I say it's an everyday challenge, even to the ones who ascribe to the values of the organization, because we are tested every day in very different scenarios. And in the course of our work, we don't always encounter the same people. Much as we say that the patients we care for, they are all different, it's the same for every staff member. We all come to work with different objectives, aspirations, with the hope that we align in that common purpose. But this common purpose are tested every day when we need to make decisions. And a lot comes into play in how we express our intentions. Sometimes what we express is just a fraction of what we actually feel at a deeper level, and we may not fully express that. And when this comes into play, it can result in perceptions that may not be the actual reality, and yet do we spend sufficient time to try to unpack that in order not to cause any misunderstandings? I would say that very often, because we need to get so much done in a given day, we may unconsciously not give sufficient time to truly seek to understand the other individual, or to be curious about why this individual is saying something which appears to be objecting my point of view. And our immediate response actually can cause a ripple effect to whether that given situation turns out well or turns out negatively. It always starts from mindset. It always starts from giving the benefit of doubt and really framing ourselves, centering ourselves to try to understand the other individual with no judgment first.
In your experience in the various roles you've played, are there specific examples of or experiences you've encountered where the role of the mindset impacts on the behaviors and enhance the environment within the unit itself and the ultimate output of the unit itself?
I would say in our current context and landscape where we are faced with a lot of external challenges that's affecting us, very often we need to deal with change. And change, if we do not unpack it adequately, it brings about a lot of fear. Whether is it logical or illogical, it is real. The sentiments are real, and in those circumstances, very often we intuitively may respond with reservations, and worst case, we respond with objections, sometimes with subtle or unsubtle resistance. And in those situations, it is really very important to try to understand how this change will affect individuals and uphold the good intentions of wanting to bring everyone along. I think it's not easy because very often we need to strike a balance between how much time we have. Do we get a consensus or we take a top-down approach, but yet preserve our sense of helpfulness to support everyone in the journey, and then also consistently. And I think the key word here is consistency in maintaining that open mind to learn from the entire episode.
It's often described that, in organizations like ours, in healthcare especially, positive cultures can result in lower burnout rates, higher job satisfaction, and better patient safety and patient outcomes. Likewise, the converse also applies. Negative cultures can have a lot of detrimental effect on the organizational function itself and the safety and outputs on the patient care outcomes altogether. Could you share with us some examples of what you mean or what would be a positive culture in a healthcare organization?
I would say what resonates very much with me is the very fact that we all begin as people. Okay, each individual is a person, and not just the role that they assume at work. So what makes it different when we come to work is we all have official roles that we assume, but behind each role is a human. And if we can recognize that, then the next thing that we should accept is we cannot know everything. And if we do not know everything, then it requires us to really be, vulnerable enough to say when I actually need help. So I always see that asking for help is also a strength. It is not a weakness. And recognizing how, inviting a colleague to help can actually help to nourish the other person, because everyone wants to be part of a bigger agenda and a purpose. And I think that positive demonstration is when a team can recognize that and know how they can actually depend on each other in order to deliver a collective positive outcome for the organization, for the people we are responsible for the community that we care for. That is really very important.
So what are some of the critical attributes or elements in a positive culture, especially in a healthcare organization?
I would say first and foremost for me, what matters most is that learning mindset, that growth mindset. And, ironically, sometimes it's not easy, especially when you're very experienced, because that human in us need to be seen as competent. But then how then do we define competence, right? We may have been there, done that, but I think in every episode of experience that we accumulate across the years, we need to recognize that in a given situation, there are permutations which we may not have encountered before. And how that can allow us to derive at a positive outcome must be through that collective efforts and that collective wisdom that we have as a team, as opposed to just an individual's view. And something that we really have to be very aware about is there is a natural pecking order in healthcare. I do not see it as negative. It is what it is, but being very aware about that, and that is one of the attributes for WeCare, it allows us to be more intentional, to draw out the voices that may actually not be heard very often.
An extension to that would be certain elements like trust, respect, empowerment. How do you see those fit into this whole spectrum of attributes or factors that would contribute to a positive workplace culture?
I would say trust, respect, they are all equally important, and there will be many factors. I wouldn't say one is more important than the other. I would say if I were to consider what is within an individual's control is again our own mindset. Like if we choose to be cautious about an individual, very often it may be shaped by past experiences, not so positive one with this individual. It may be also validated by what we have heard from others. But the preposition I'd like to make here is, would we then give ourselves a chance and an opportunity to see for ourselves, to validate for ourselves by approaching this individual with an open mind? Because not every single encounter is the same. And even if this individual consistently demonstrates a certain behavior or response that worries us, are we curious enough to try to understand why? Because we can never know a person's full story, but if we can value this individual for his strengths, her strengths, then it allows us to actually get to know this individual at a deeper level in order for us to continue to do our best together.
Yeah, thanks for highlighting such important aspects that we don't often talk about or even consider in our day-to-day business. I think what you've highlighted really is this whole mindset that we emphasize a lot in the WeCare program and the concept itself. And really the inward mindset closes our minds to possibilities, as you said, and we kind of fixate ourselves in a certain perspective of a person or situation, and hence we don't open up to further consideration, even communication or so. And that can lead to a lot of very biased sort of responses, and it can end up with very poor interpersonal interactions that can lead to very negative sort of work environment altogether. That leads to this whole concern we always have. A negative culture in a workplace leads to detrimental work environment and certainly poorer patient care outcomes and poor patient safety. Have you had any experiences with that, and how would you share with our audience, some of these examples that we can learn from?
I would say these encounters are quite common, if I may be really frank about it. And if left unchecked, right, it becomes normalized as part of the organization's dysfunction. It all starts first and foremost with appreciating, where the boundaries are, and that is the self-awareness bit. But that has to be examined further with the role that we assume at work and our accountabilities. Having clarity around it allows us to actually identify when I need to escalate a given situation. But very often we sense the room, we sense the environment around us, and we are very, very intuitive to what we see around us, the social cues. And if we see that, something's not right, but the seemingly more experienced people around us are not speaking up about it, we will start to question if this is the unspoken rule that we do not bring these matters up. Yeah. And if it is allowed to fester, very often individuals can actually be resigned to that situation. It causes them to be very disillusioned. It actually perpetuates the negative culture. And I think this is where leaders would have to play a very important role. And when I talk about leaders, I'm talking about everyone. Not just from a hierarchical perspective, but we are all leaders in our own right, starting first by leading ourselves. So if we can encourage each and every one of us to recognize that that is our accountability, then collectively, any tensions, any uncomfortable moments that we encounter should be positioned and framed as part of learning. And if you can frame that, then it is about how we exercise congruence in how we respond to a given situation, where if there is a bad outcome, that we understand and identify the accountability in it, but yet draw the learning insights for it. And if repeated, it further validates this whole impression that I can actually learn from this situation, but it is my accountability not to repeat the same issue or the same negative outcome.
It is really interesting that this same issue keeps churning out in every aspect of all the work that we're doing and we talk about. So, what are some of the strategies you have looked at that could try to address this issue here
Right.
and the whole issue of negative culture in the workplace?
I think with culture, with psychological safety, with trust, and everything else, it has to start from leadership. It has to start with leadership demonstrating this in a consistent manner. But it is easy to say, right?
Yes.
And that is the reason why, with every given episode that we encounter, it could be a once-off, serious event, or it could be a sustained period where a specific department is demonstrating very poor outcomes, and we try to understand why. How we respond as leaders matters a lot. And I think leaders are also just as human as the rest of our staff. And it is then important for us to be very introspective and to spend time to unpack what this means. That I consider this as exercise that we need to do, because every situation that we encounter is something that is very unique to us. But if we spend time talking about this as a leadership team and how we address this, we can actually learn faster, through the efforts and the encounters of our fellow colleagues. And this is very important because when we go out there to support our staff, we don't just do this alone. Sometimes they encounter different individuals and they need to hear the same message, and it has to be anchored on that shared values, that beliefs, and the guiding principles of how we get things done. Because a lot of times, this situation requires us to deal with trade-offs. And in these moments when we make these trade-offs, it could be a patient-related encounter. It could be a staff well-being matter. There are a lot of teachable moments that we can glean from it. And it is very important that we do this, because in those moments, we are also guiding and developing our people to lead better.
I like the point you brought up. Really, leadership is not just about the top leadership as in the C-suites. Everybody is a leader in your own right, in your own way. And many people will have a team of at least a few people they work with around them, and they have a leadership role. And I think it's very important as we discuss this topic, really, for us to focus on the fact that leadership modeling is very important. Everybody has a role to play in it, and everybody has a responsibility to lead by example. How do you think we can actually kind of promote this across the organization so large as NUHS, which is like 18,000 and growing by the day? How do you think we can actually bridge all these differences and unite them with a common culture?
Right. I've always found it very powerful to see leaders working together. And also for us to be really mindful that a lot of times we get into very deep discussions to make good decisions for the organization and the system. But we are all within a small room and a small collection of people. by the time this information together with the intents are cascaded down, the broken telephone line, it gets lost.
Yes.
And if we can all pay more attention to that and also create moments where our people can see us working together, that is the most powerful testimony of seeing that consistency across leadership. And this is really recognizing the very fact that because our staff may not all encounter us at the same time, very often they rely on hearsay. And if they don't understand why a certain decision is made, it is so easy for it to be concluded as such that, oh, so-and-so is being difficult. But is so-and-so truly being difficult? I think there's a lot more to uncover in that. And if we choose not to uncover that, then we also miss the opportunity to see the good intentions behind why decisions are made.
Wonderful. I mean, you brought up so many rich, wise points. Really the mindset plays a very important part, how we perceive different situations and different interactions. You brought up a very important point of consistency. That sometimes can be quite challenging as well in different situations. We all have our weaknesses and our shortcomings as well. But I think one very other important point I like to raise is authenticity. You'd like to share a little bit about that particular term itself?
Right. I think in the context of today's chat, I would relate authenticity to well-being. When I was much younger,
Not too long ago, yes.
not too long ago, thank you very much, I felt that I was quite effective in operating as one person at home, another person at work. But perhaps it's age, and perhaps it's also experience, and perhaps it's also fatigue. I recognize that the way to be authentic is to first and foremost be at peace with myself, imperfections, inadequacies, strengths, and all that. The minute I can accept the way I am, right, then I think it's a lot more energizing not to try to be someone I am not. And I think it's very important at work because at work, we all have a role to play. We all aspire to do better. And sometimes we are so aware that no matter how hard I try, I can never get there. Then the question is, do we need to get there? What is there? And if all of us can be accepted to being our true selves at work, everything else is for the individual to decide how much of their true selves do they want to reveal at work. And sometimes it is also about expectations we have about others. Very often I hear remarks like, why can't you be more like so-and-so? But is this person so-and-so? The answer is no. But is this person trying his or her best? The answer is yes. Then is it a matter of, is this person in the right role, in the right fit? So if we can first and foremost value the strength in each individual and the efforts that they are putting, and we correspondingly provide the support that's needed, everything else is really trying to achieve that goal together, big or small. Everything else is about learning, is about discovering the beauty of a journey that is so unique that it is not one that is the same from the other.
Wow, Margaret, such wisdom in all you say. You really kind of encompass the whole of the concept of the culture transformation within NUHS, really in a nutshell, in living words, in experience. As you said quite correctly, the three key tenets of the WeCare is really self-awareness, accountability, and collaboration. With that, we can really then get people to understand and adopt the correct mindset so that they can interact optimally and do the best really for one another and for the patients that come under their care. And really, we hope that through this culture transformation throughout NUHS, throughout all the institutions, throughout the all 18 over 1,000 people, and with our leadership modeling it at all levels, we want to make sure that well-being is also a very important and primary priority in our organization so our people can be their best version of themselves to care for our people in the best way that we can. So thank you so much for this conversation. Daniel. Such a pleasure to meet up with you again. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.